Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me this week, Fire Chief Holger Durre.
Hello again.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. This week, the day that this podcast will be released is the 10th commemoration of the loss of the Granite Mountain Hotshots. Mm-hmm. And so we thought we'd get together this week. I know you're going to do this podcast, and then I'm meeting with you tomorrow to record yours, to talk about the 10th. You can't say anniversary. I mean, anniversary is normally a celebratory thing. And I think you said the families call it the 10th Remembrance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for the IMT that we formed last fall, we settled on commemoration. I think one of the things that's really important to understand here is that, yes, this is definitely a somber event on some notes, but also, it's a remembrance and celebration of the legacy that the Hotshots left. There's a lot of things in our DNA at Prescott Fire that is the Granite Mountain Hotshot DNA. And so for us to be too somber about that also precludes us from being proud of some of that history.
Well, and I think it's important, and I like the families using the term remembrance because it's always good to celebrate the lives. And those men, a lot of them had relatively short lives, but they did a lot in the time that they did have, and protected a lot of communities and properties and people. And they gave their lives doing that. And so it's good to remember them and remember the good things that they did while they were here. And it's a challenge. And I know Friday is going to be a very heavy day for a lot of people and the Prescott community, because it really, I think it drove the Prescott community or brought them together for a time, very, very closely connected.
Yeah. And I think some of that still happens. So one of the remarkable things that has come out of this is that there are now nonprofit entities that exist because of this event that have done innumerable good in the community. The Learning and Tribute Center is just one of them. We had a visit from the Angeles National Forest and the Los Angeles County command staff that did their spring leadership retreat here. They did a staff ride at Yarnell, and then they came here and, did their meetings. And at the conclusion, we were able to get them into the Learning and Tribute Center, and they were all extraordinarily impacted by that. And one of the volunteers and I sort of reflected and said, we sometimes forget just how good some of these things are that came out of it. And the way that we tell their story and the way that the Learning and Tribute Center, the Eric Marsh Foundation, even the Prescott Firefighter charities that already existed at that time have started to integrate some of that. It's a very, very impactful thing. So those 19 are still having a significant impact, not just on this community, but on the American Fire Service in general. And that's a really, really big deal.
Well, and I think there's a lot to be learned from that time. And like you said, the Tribute Center is just an amazing, and now there's the Granite Mountain Memorial Trail. Have you hiked that trail?
So yeah, I've hiked the trail, and then I've also done the staff ride, which follows their footsteps, because I think it was important for me when I came in at the beginning of this podcast. I both remarked that neither of us were here at the time of the tragedy, and I think that speaks to the fire chief as a steward of a position. And so for us, it was very important that I understood where they walked and understood some of the details that helped me better serve in my capacity to guide the department forward. But yes, I've been there. The state park is incredible.
Absolutely it is.
When you look at the amount of thought and the amount of planning that went into that, it is phenomenal. And so something so awful to have happened, but something like that to come out of it, I think is just tremendous.
Well, and I came here to interview 2 weeks after the event, and so I met some of the folks with Chino Valley Fire when I first came in at the incident command post at the school. And then I started here almost 2 months to the day after the event, and one of the first people that I met really connected to it was Captain Danny Parker, whose son Wade was one of the 19, and Danny was a captain at Chino at the time. He was on duty the day of the event. And then responded to the scene from there. I also got a chance to do the staff ride when they set them up and walk those steps. And I have to say, coming from Missouri and not having a wildland background, walking in their steps, one was surreal, but two was also kind of an introduction or lesson for me to learn more about wildland fires and how they're managed and how they operate within that sphere. So it was somber but helpful to do that. And then I've hiked the trail, which is just a beautiful area. But make sure if you're going to do it that you are well hydrated, you're taking water, because it's a heck of a hike. Trying to get the Western Fire Chiefs Association Force Conference to come to Prescott, because I'd like them to come in a day early if they decide to come here, so that we can take them on that trail. And folks who were here at the time can have that conversation with chiefs from the Western United States about what happened that day and then the impact long term with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it speaks to the fact that we have a responsibility to tell the story, right? I mean, there's so many stakeholders that are involved with this. Of course, the families of the 19 are the most important ones. However, when you look at what you just covered, right, that we have a story that can help prevent similar events from happening, that also honors the legacy from telling the story, that helps us meet the responsibility that we have to the American Fire Service and the general public to make sure that we give access to that. Because when you have a tragedy of this magnitude, it is not just you who owns it, right? There is a collective ownership that is nationwide on some level.
Right.
You know, sure, for us that sit in it every day, it's sometimes difficult to have another phone call from another media outlet or somebody asking a question when you really don't want to answer that question. Right. However, it also is a reminder that there is that responsibility that comes along with that. None of us ever asked to be in a very select few fire departments in the country that have had to face this kind of a tragedy. But when you're in it, that also is a piece of this where things like that, of hosting folks from the outside to keep that story alive and to keep that memory alive and to have it integrate into somebody else's fire service career is very, very important to do.
Well, and although it's a very tragic day, it is important to remember that and keep the memory of the 19 alive and keep the story going, so that people do remember every year on June 30th. We need to take a moment to pause, just be silent and think, and celebrate their lives and what they brought to the fire service and to this community. And you know, it's interesting. I was at the Force Conference. I went through the 2-day Struggle Well seminar. I talked to you a little bit about that. And they talked about thriving after tragedy. And one of the things that led to Struggle Well was the professors that were researching that were talking to families who had lost children. And they were amazed at how those families continued to thrive. And what they said was, I can't go back and change what happened. I can't change that day or that incident. But what I can do is make sure that I keep moving forward, and maybe my story will help someone else. And then I'll continue to get stronger the more that I remember and work on things to prevent. And I know a lot of the families have done some work with some folks to try to prevent future tragedies from happening, whether it's better safety gear, different procedures, whatever that is. And so you see growth in the aftermath of tragedy. Yeah,
and I'm glad you bring that up, because one of the things for the Prescott Fire Department that's really important for people to understand is, as impactful and as tremendously challenging as this was for the families and for the department, it doesn't define us.
Right.
It is part of what makes us the department that we are. It is definitely a proud component of our history, but it also is something, to your point, in part as integrating and moving forward, it gives us purpose, right? And it is, again, something that can help somebody else. And part of that giving purpose to this tragedy is to help others and to pay it forward. The amazing amount of help that we received in the days after and since then is innumerable. I mean, even just this morning, a good acquaintance of yours and mine kind of said, hey, just thinking of you. And I said, I know you were here at the time when this happened, and I can't thank you enough, right? And that, I mean, those are conversations I have almost daily, because so many people came in. Well, like you said, us moving forward in a very positive, optimistic way that pays that forward make sure that we're there for somebody when they need it, and that story continues to have a positive impact.
Yeah. Well, and the commemoration on Friday, so there's a lot happening, and we do have some of our friends from the Valley bringing engines up, and they're bringing engines up to help cover our community because we have the commemoration on Friday. We have the rodeo that starts this weekend as well, and we're talking thousands of people being moved into our community. So talk a little bit about what does this Friday look like for the commemoration?
Yeah, so this Friday, we always have every year in the morning a private service for the families and, the department and alumni. And that'll happen as it has in years past. But then in the afternoon at 3 o'clock on Courthouse Square, we'll have the public commemoration. It'll be about an hour and a half. And it is modeled similarly to the event in Colorado Springs in terms of the flow. We'll have a couple of speakers. The governor will be there. It sounds like the IFF president will be there. We'll have our mayor speak. And I think the one I'm most excited about is Ryder Ashcraft, the son of one of the Hotshots, is also speaking.
Oh, wow.
Which is tremendous, right? Because this year we wanted to make sure that anything that we did was primarily about the children. And, these kids now 10 years on are starting to understand, some of them are young adults. And it's important for us to make sure that we evolve with their needs. And one of the ways I think we can do that is to make sure that this 10th commemoration focuses on the kids. Now, on the 29th, the Learning and Tribute Center also has their 5th birthday celebration. That's going to be at 11:30 at the Gateway Mall, and then kind of working backwards on the 28th at 11:30 at the Chamber of Commerce. We have a mural reveal that's going to be on the side of the Chamber of Commerce. An artist came in from a show called The Reveal, and she does painting specifically for service and sacrifice-oriented events in our country's history. Okay. And she has done a mural that she'll be revealing at that time. And those are kind of the public-facing events. Now, there's also some great activities at Founding Fathers, both on the 29th and the 30th that Local 3066 is sponsoring. And definitely would love to see a lot of people there. They're fundraisers to help with some of the charitable activities that I was already talking about. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things. The analogy that I used when we first started this planning team was I wanted to have a table that everybody could sit at, that was large enough for everyone to have a seat. And one of the things that's really important to understand there is that because there are so many different stakeholders, families, the department members, the community at large, the Arizona Fire Service, I mean, I could keep going.
Right.
We need to make sure that we have something that encompasses. Now, that means that not everybody's going to be sitting at that table at every meal.
Sure.
Some of the family members, for instance, rightfully so and understandably so, don't want the public pomp and circumstance.
Right.
As a matter of fact, one of the things, as I was thinking about my comments for that public event, is you're not going to see a lot of fire department members there. And the reason for that is, number one, the way that Prescott Fire pays tribute is we work. We don't want to be coddled. We don't want to be given special treatment. And a lot of them don't want to be at that public event. And if you think about it, if we ever said, hey, we're going to throw a public party for a hotshot, that doesn't equate, because the hotshot ethos is you show up quietly in the middle of the night and hope nobody ever notices that you were there other than seeing your positive impact, right? So the reason why I bring that up is because that public commemoration is definitely community focused. But we want to make sure that, as many people as possible can pay their tribute in a way that it makes sense for them.
Well, and I think, for us, your stations will be staffed with Prescott crews.
Correct.
CAFMA stations will be staffed with CAFMA crews. And I know a lot of folks in the Valley were thinking, hey, we're going to put teams together and come up and cover your stations for you. But I think the way that most of our crews commemorate is they work and continue to serve the community. But a lot of those Valley crews were up here in the immediate aftermath and really showed so much support for the community. And so you and I talked about it, and we both agreed, it's important for those Valley crews that want to come up and help to have that opportunity. Not to mention the fact that between the rodeo and the commemoration, we have thousands of people descending on our area in close quarters. So having some additional resources up here, because we are like an island, is very helpful. And we do just a shout out to the Valley area departments that are so willing to come up and help and provide coverage for our community. We just appreciate that.
Yeah, and that pre-positioning, to your point, in case something larger happens outside of that event, it does help us be able to focus during that time period for the command staff to make sure we put on the event. And then also for our crews, absolutely. We do appreciate it. While they're not going to be backfilling those stations, that doesn't mean that we are not appreciative of it, you know, and I think that context to understand that when you think about a department our size that had 19 funerals, you know, there's definitely some level of, you know, I don't need another commemoration. Not in a disrespectful way, quite the opposite. It's back to that struggle well, right? One of the things that I say to our department all the time is there are as many correct ways to grieve this as there are members on this department, as long as you're using healthy coping mechanisms. And that means that a lot of them might not even be in the area. You know, I know a lot of families and I know a lot of our department members that just take vacation and they're not even in the region, and that's how they cope. And that's completely okay. But our newer members, for instance, that have gotten on since the tragedy, they do want to be a little bit closer to this because it is an important part of our story, our identity as a fire department, and that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the public coming in Friday afternoon, logistics.
Yes.
What are you looking at as far as parking, road closures, things like that?
So for the public in general, get there early. Just like any other event in Courthouse Square, especially with the fact that it's rodeo weekend, the parade is the next day. There are so many activities. Please follow the road signs, get there early. There will not be public seating. So if you want a lawn chair, bring that with you. If you want a blanket, bring that with you. It'll be on the grass facing Goodwin Street. For the VIPs, the families, and the other staff, they've already been notified where to get a parking pass and where they would park. You know, for the local fire service agencies and the state fire service agencies with their larger apparatus, they can park on the Mile High Middle School football field. And then for overflow like you and I with our smaller cars, we'll figure that out. As long as you're in your official vehicle, we can make that work. But yes, for folks, especially for the general public, I just want to reiterate: get there early. It is going to be a pretty exciting ceremony. It'll conclude with a moment of silence, the bell ringing, and a flyover from Luke Air Force Base. And so it'll be definitely a moving event. And my guess is it's going to attract quite a few people. So get there early.
Well, and it's a busy weekend down in the city of Prescott. Just in general terms, with the Commemoration Friday, the rodeo parade Saturday, and then the hose cart races for the firefighters on Sunday that shuts down Cortez. So a lot happening in the city this weekend, going to be very busy. So we ask for your patience because there's going to be traffic.
Lots of traffic
and road closures. But with that, Chief, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about this. Kathy, I don't know if there's a way for us to add something in, some visual effect in memory of, but it'd be great for the YouTube side if we could do that.
Yes, I can see what I can do about that.
You know, and actually, just to close that off, there is a tribute that has been started by one of the dads of the fallen called 19 Seconds of Silence. And we're asking everybody around the country if they want to, at that particular time in the afternoon, to join us in 19 Seconds of Silence. And maybe that's something we can include with the material that accompany this podcast.
Absolutely. No, that would be great. I appreciate it. Chief,
thank you.
Always good to see you. We will visit again on your
show.
Yes. Tomorrow it'll be good. But
Fantastic.
With that, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.